Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're going to be discussing stress management for children and teens. And we're going to be looking at this through a holistic lens and how to deal with stress. So let's start by talking about the types of stress. Most people are familiar with distress. It's the kind that we hear about all the time. It's this sort of negative stress, but fewer are aware of eustress. That's spelled EU stress. And that's the positive stress. And it has the following characteristics, and this is how you'll be able to identify it. It motivates you. It focuses your energy. It's short term. It's perceived as within our coping abilities. It feels exciting and it improves our performance. Whereas distress, or the negative stress, has the following characteristics. It causes anxiety or concern. It can be short or long term. It is perceived as outside our ability to cope, and it feels unpleasant. It decreases performance, and it can lead to physical or mental health problems. It is somewhat hard to categorize all stressors objectively as either eustress or distress, because stress itself affects people in different ways and they have different reactions to particular situations and stimulants. So we can generalize, though, a list of stressors that are typically experienced negative or positive, and to most people most of the time. Examples of some negative stressors would include the death of a spouse, filing for divorce, losing contact with loved ones, hospitalization of yourself or a family member, a serious injury or illness, being abused or neglected, separation from a spouse or a committed relationship partner, conflict in interpersonal relationships, bankruptcy or money problems, unemployment, sleep problems, and children's problems at school. And so we notice out of this list how about half of it applies to adults, but about half of it applies to children and adolescents. Legal problems as well tend to be a negative stress. Some examples of positive stressors include receiving a promotion or completing an achievement, starting a new job, marriage, buying a home, having a child, moving, taking a vacation, holiday seasons, retiring, or taking educational classes or learning a new hobby. Stressors are not always limited to situations where there's an external issue. Sometimes internal events, as feelings and thoughts and habitual behaviors, can also cause negative stress. And some of these include fears, like we all have a fear of something, and sometimes it could be like fear of flying or heights or public speaking, chatting with strangers at a party. Public speaking is one that most teenagers experience. Repetitive thought patterns, worrying about future events, like waiting for the results of an exam, or getting a new job, or moving to a new place. Unrealistic perfectionist expectations we see a lot in teens, where they're trying to perform to a certain level, and so this causes a negative stress. Habitual behavior patterns can also lead to stress, and we see these oftentimes in teenagers as well, where you have overscheduling or failing to be assertive. So if you have somebody that's more of an introvert and it's hard for them to be as assertive, that can be an internal stressor. Or procrastination, waiting to complete that paper until the night before, or failing to plan ahead. So these are some of the types of stress and some of the indicators that you'll see, both positive, the eustress, and the negative distress. So how stress affects the body. There's a physiological response that we have to stress, both positive and negatively. Some of the areas of the body that we have evidence that stress affects are the muscles, the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the gastrointestinal system, like your stomach, the nervous system, the male and female reproductive systems. So, for example, stress can make premenstrual syndrome symptoms even worse. And the endocrine system, which is the one that we're more concerned about with mental health, because the hypothalamus will signal the autonomic nervous system and the pituitary gland, and the process is started to produce epinephrine and cortisol, which are known as the stress hormones. So it has an actual effect, that mind-body connection. And when we think about looking at it holistically, we want to think about that, but the stress will have an effect on the body. So if we look at more closely at stress reduction, and particularly we're looking at teens and children in this episode, we're going to look at some techniques. And those techniques are going to include spiritual habits, eating habits, conducive environments, time management, exercise, mindfulness, and sleep. So some of the ways that we can work on stress management from a spirituality viewpoint are first through prayer. There has been research that shows that ritualistic habits can help reduce anxiety. They can help reduce stress. And with the 5 obligatory prayers that Muslims pray every day, there's a ritual involved in the purification and the actual movements. And there has been some work done around the actual movements and the points that are touched upon when people actually, the physical movement of the prayer. And so prayer itself can be a stress reliever, as well as the meaning of the prayer and taking your concerns to God can also be relieving, to let those feelings and those concerns out and give them up, let them go to a higher power. The second spiritual habit would be Quran. Reading the Quran is also something that can be helpful in stress management. It's, again, habitual, it's ritual. It has meaning, which can help people reduce their stress. It can also be stress-inducing if you haven't read it on a regular basis. So monitor for that. And if you find yourself in a space where you're feeling stressed from reading, take a break, come back to it. If you still feel stress, then stop for the day and go back to it another day. A third part of the spiritual aspects are charity. Charitable acts have been known to raise mood instantly. So, for example, one idea would be if you saw your neighbor's porch cluttered with newspapers and they're elderly, and you go and you help them clear away this clutter and help them clear away their mess, that will automatically elevate your mood, and it will also be helpful to someone else. Dhikr beads. There are research evidence showing that remembrance beads, as we call them in Islam, here's an example of them, can help to reduce anxiety and can help with depressive thoughts. And so thus they can also help with stress, with distress. The actual movements on the fingers, the physical sensation helps, as well as the repetitive and ritualistic experience. And this is known actually not just in the Islamic faith, but also in the Catholic faith. There are rosary beads. In Buddhist have worry beads. And in fact, that's what they're called, worry beads, because they actually help to reduce stress. And then on the adjunctive site that we've created, nafshealertherapy.wordpress.com, we will have an instructional sheet for how you can make your own remembrance beads. Next, I want to look at eating habits. If we look at tips for reducing stress through diet, there are 3 things to think about: timing, portion, and nutrition. On stressful days, if you eat little and often, this will keep your metabolism ticking over the whole day and will minimize peaks through in your energy levels. And so we know, for example, if you eat throughout the day small meals, it also keeps your blood sugar level stable. So it's good to eat breakfast even if you're not planning to. You may not feel hungry or believe that you don't need to, but eating breakfast helps to kickstart your metabolism for the day and to stabilize that blood sugar level, which will in turn reduce stress. They advise that you choose fruit or fruit juice or whole grain cereal for maximum benefits. And you want to eat well throughout the day. So you want to choose foods that include things like B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium. Magnesium can help relax your muscles. Vitamin C works on your adrenal glands. And B vitamins give you more energy. So in addition, you want to avoid things like caffeine. And if you're so used to drinking caffeine, caffeine has a couple problems for teenagers. One, it stimulates teenagers' systems in different ways than adults. So for example, if a teenager is going to Starbucks or someplace where they're having coffee or mochas and things like this, it may have a more adverse effect on their heart than, say, an adult. For some reason, it affects their bodies differently and impacts them more heavily than an adult. And so you want to watch out for the caffeine usage. If you are used to using a lot of caffeine, you might want to try to wean off of it by using tea or decaffeinated versions of coffee. Herbal teas, green teas, these are all good for you. You also want to avoid alcohol, sugar, salt, and nicotine. You should reduce these or not use them at all. And consider your portion sizes, and then again, the timing. So next we're going to look at constructing a conducive environment. Well, what I'm talking about here is to have spaces that you can go to for either creating the eustress or reducing the distress, right? So if you identify spaces that are both stimulating and relaxing in your home or in your outside environment, this will be advantageous to you because then you can choose to affect one or the other. So what that might look like is, let's say I want to increase my eustress. Well, one way I can do that is through exercise. And so I would look for an environment that has that possibility. If I want to decrease the distress, I'm going to look for a more quiet space that is a clean environment and has appropriate levels of light and noise. So if you want to calm yourself, you're going to have, typically, for most people, you're going to have less noise and less light. And that type of environment will actually bring your stress levels down for most people. So you want to identify those environments that have both of those aspects, the eustress and the ability to reduce distress, where those might be, so that when you need them, you can go to them. If you don't already have one, if you realize that, well, I can't identify either one of those, then create them. So next we'll look at time management. Time management is really important in managing your stress because it allows you to put things in place. So for example, one of the things you might try is to raise your awareness of what your time management is already. And we have on the website a worksheet that you can use with your children or your teen or for even yourself. And it looks like this. So it's a time management pie chart. And what you're going to do is take the circle pie and you're going to shade in with different colors, or you can use different patterns. If you only have one color like a pencil, you can just make different patterns to distinguish. And you're going to put in the time you use for sleep, the time you use for eating, the time you use for work, or in the case of children and teens when they're at school. And you're just going to list out all the ways you spend your day and evaluate, how much time you're spending on each thing and see how balanced it is. If it looks really imbalanced, then you're going to know I need to make some adjustments. If it looks pretty balanced, then maybe you're doing okay. But again, we'll have this on the website for you to download so you can use this for yourself and your children, and try to find a balance of all the activities that you're doing when you finish this. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Right now, we're going to take a break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back to discuss more stress management for children and teens.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're discussing a holistic view of stress management for children and teens. And we're going to continue by talking about something I mentioned before, which is exercise. Exercise is one of those forms of eustress, and it really doesn't matter what kind of exercise you choose as long as you're exercising. It will increase the positive endorphins in your system and alter your mood to a more contented, happier state. And it's also just good for your overall general health, which is going to help in reducing the stress to all those other systems that we talked about before in your body. So I would encourage you as a parent to consider, allowing your children to choose exercise that they feel an affinity with. And if they try something and they don't like it, it's okay to try something else, just as long as they're up and they're moving. There are some types of exercise that don't even require a lot of competitiveness. So for example, yoga, or there is even laughter yoga, which is great. And there are many types of exercises that aren't just the mainstream basketball, football, soccer. You can find other types of exercises that, like horseback riding. Think outside of the box. Just find something that you like and stick with it and make it part of your regular routine. And that will help to reduce your stress and manage it. Next, I want to talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that will help children regulate their emotions. And it's really important to consider practicing mindfulness on a regular basis because it will help children and teens stay calm. We're going to, in another episode, go into mindfulness in a lot more detail. But for the purposes of this episode, I want to mention it and also mention to you that there are a couple of exercises that are known to be a part of mindfulness, and these are breathing techniques and guided imagery. And we will have examples of both of these on nefshealertherapy.wordpress.com for you to listen to and to use as you wish. Next, I want to look at sleep. So sleep is really important. As we know, it is the food for the brain, and it's during sleep where important body functions and brain activity occur. If you skip sleep, it can be really harmful and even deadly, particularly if you're at the age where you're already driving. So you can look bad, you may feel moody, or you may perform poorly due to a lack of sleep. And it can make it hard to get along with family and friends, so it can make you quite irritable. It can affect your exam scores. It can even affect your ability to play in sports. Remember that a brain that is hungry for sleep will get it, even when you don't expect it. So if you do not feed that need for sleep, your body will make you sleep anyway, in one way or another. And so just to let parents know how important sleep is, especially with young teens who are driving, There's over 100,000 crashes per year that are due to a lack of sleep. So when you don't have enough sleep, you're more likely to have injury. I just want to share a few facts with you about sleep. It's important, obviously vital to your well-being, just as much as the air you breathe and the water you drink. Biological sleep patterns shift toward later times for both sleeping and walking during adolescence. And so it is not natural with the biological rhythms of a teenager to fall asleep before the time of 11 p.m. So it's something to keep in mind as you're setting curfews and as you're setting your expectations around bedtimes for your children, that if you ask them to go to bed before 11 p.m. and they're a teenager, it's going to be very hard for them. They need about 10 hours of sleep, 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night to function the best. And most teens don't get enough sleep. And the reason why, if we think about it, if their body naturally is saying, I can't go to sleep until 11 p.m., and they have to be at school by 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning, they're not going to have enough time to really get in adequate sleep. One study we found reports that only 15% of adolescents report sleeping 8.5 hours on school nights. Working with a population of adolescents myself, I found that many of them are getting more like 4 or 5 hours of sleep per night because of their homework. And so as parents, we really need to monitor this very closely because we need to make sure they're getting that sleep somewhere. As we've had in the past, we had Dr. Faisal Qazi on the show who talked about the possibilities of catching up on sleep. So there is that possibility maybe on the weekends or vacation times where they can get more rest and more sleep to prepare their bodies for those times where they're not going to get the adequate sleep that they should get. And so along with that, of course, teens tend to have irregular sleep patterns, and this affects their quality of sleep. Some of them suffer from sleep disorders, so it's important to keep your eyes open for that, parents. These sleep disorders are called narcolepsy, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, or sleep apnea. Some of these have clear indications. So for example, sleep apnea, if your child snores very loudly, or you find that when they're sleeping, you don't hear them breathing, these are good signs that they might have sleep apnea, and you should consult with a physician to see if your child has a sleep disorder. Some of the consequences of not getting enough sleep are that it limits your ability to learn in the classroom. It makes it hard for you to listen and concentrate, to solve problems, and it causes you to forget things because you're just foggy. But it also makes you more prone to get pimples, which is something that teenagers are very concerned about. It can contribute to acne and other skin problems. It can make them impatient with their family members or their teachers, and it can cause them to eat unhealthy foods like sweets or fried foods that also then, of course, lead to gaining weight. And it can heighten the effects of caffeine and nicotine, and it can also make them very drowsy. So some solutions to the sleep issue are to make sleep a priority. You can create a sleep diary to raise your awareness around what is my sleep pattern, and then adjust it as best you can to try to get to those 8 to 10 hours of sleep. If you can take a nap during the day to offset some of that, maybe in the afternoon, like a 10, 20-minute nap, that will still help a little bit in that sleep deprivation. No pills or vitamins or drinks can replace the good sleep, so keep that in mind as you're thinking, well, if I just have a little caffeine, then I'll be able to get through. But that can actually have the opposite effect. When you think about sleep deprivation with your teen drivers, it's important to know that it impairs your driving, the same as a blood alcohol content of 0.08%, which is illegal for most drivers in most states. So again, you're looking at a sleepy driver driving like somebody who's drunk. So another thing you can do is establish a wake time and a bedtime and stick to it. Keep that regular routine. That helps. And you will find that once you have habitualized that, your body will develop its own rhythm and it'll be wanting to do that. Don't eat, drink, or exercise within a few hours of bedtime because that can stimulate you and make it harder to go to sleep. For some people, though, exercise can make them relaxed. So look at that on an individual basis. Try not to leave your homework for last minute. Avoid the TV, computer, and telephone an hour before you go to bed. And if you're one of those people that keeps a lot of thinking going in your mind, like you ruminate, you can write it down on a notepad and, put it next to your bed so that you can address it later. Lastly, I want to look at the idea of taking an integrative approach. Stress management for teens is really important, and it's important that we look at the holistic aspect of it. So we want to look at the mind, the body, the spirit, and address all of these when we're looking at addressing stress management with children and teens. And just to finish, because some people might ask, well, how does this fit with our Islam? But if we look in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the second surah, in the verse 103, Allah says, "And had they but believed and been conscious of Him, reward from God would indeed have brought them good had they but known it." And so, there is a place for stillness. There is a place for recognition. There is a place to calm ourselves and be cognizant of our stress, both the good stress and the bad stress. So I'm hoping that some of what we've shared with you today will be helpful to you and help you in helping your families and your children and your teens. So I want to thank you, and this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. And please be sure to check out our new adjunctive website with all of our PDFs and podcasts to help you with your children and your teens. Thank you.